Hello everybody, welcome back to Cinema Savvy. It is myself, George, bringing you a brand new review, a very special review indeed. I am going to be talking Masters of the Air, the new series which starts streaming on Apple this Friday. I have been incredibly fortunate and I have been able to watch the entire series over the weekend just gone, and I'm going to be giving my spoiler-free thoughts on the series. Now, I'm saying spoiler-free, of course, this is based off real life, based off the novel Masters of the Air, written by Donald L. Miller, which you can purchase in shops if you want to know more about the series, the real life side of things, the people that influence the roles and performances, and so many other great things. So the book is out. I've seen the whole thing. And I'm going to try and do my best to talk about this in a short and sweet review because I don't want to go too overboard. I've built up to this. I've rewatched Band of Brothers. I've watched The Pacific. And the lead up to Mass of the Air, it's a series I've been anticipating for, honestly, years. I can't tell you how long. The talk that there was going to be a third series in development from Playtone. Of course, Gary Gertz, Tom Hanks involved, Steven Spielberg still all producing, executive producing, following on from Saving Private Ryan through to this. I was sold before this was even announced, and then there were murmurs that it's going to be on the Air Force this time around, not the RAF, but the American side of it that came to England for obviously the bombing and stuff, the bombers, sorry. And I was quite intrigued. I've never really seen much about the bombers. I know we spent time with the 100th in this. It's telling the story of this group throughout the time in the war. There's going to be comparisons to Band of Brothers in the Pacific in this review because it's sort of impossible not to talk about it. I'm not going to make the terrible mistake one of the big UK tabloids did this week and call it the same universe. No, because it's based off real life. Ridiculous. But it is hard not to approach this having watched the other two shows, having know that there is a creative consistency with the people involved in the high-ups, looking at the cast members too, that Band of Brothers, I spoke in a video about how they've all gone on to do so much already. The Pacific, you've had some real big names come from that. And in this third series, the cycle is going to repeat, and I actually think, giving my initial thoughts, that this series is much closer to Band of Brothers than it is the Pacific, which is the absolute best case scenario for me. And I'm going to be not talking about individual episodes. They are streaming every Friday. The first two come out this week. I've asked by Apple not to say anything about this episode, so I can't talk to you about what happens to certain characters, actors, certain storylines. But I'm going to try and do my best to bring it all down into this shorter review, which I know is very tricky for 9 hours worth of TV. And I'm going to kind of kickstart talking about some of the performances. Now, Austin Butler is by a country mile, one of just the coolest actors in the world. He is absolutely flying at the moment. Of course, Elvis came out. We've got Dune Part 2 coming out in a few weeks, which is still ridiculous to say. And I'm also going to flag the fact that Masters of the Air was filming back in 2021. It has had numerous delays to the point that I've got a very weird almost story where at the Bond premiere, I did not realise that Austin Butler and Callum Turner were stood behind me and a friend. Didn't know that, so I'll forever live with them walking past, getting into a car, and I could have met the pair of them. That's how far back we're going with regards to filming, because it was shooting here in the UK. A lot of it filmed in Oxford at some studio spaces. So it's been in production for a very long time. The creative story, I think, goes back as far as 2012, when they first started speaking about wanting to try and do this series. So you can only imagine how long it's taken. And the big question, this has ended up on Apple, not HBO. Apple co-funding this. I believe the budget's gone up $250 million, which has got to be one of the most expensive miniseries ever made. And I'm going to kind of line in with that saying, one of my fears for the series heading into it was how on earth are you going to shoot this series that is focused on the bombers, that's focused on, you know, what happened in the air compared to the ground level, the troops with respect to location, shooting practically, all this sorts of stuff, because you go out to Band of Brothers in the Pacific and you really see that budget on screen. It feels like documentary at times of some of those. And Mass of the Air, that was one of my biggest concerns, is I don't want it to look cheap, to look terrible. There's a visual style that was with those first two series. How are they going to do it for the third one? And I can honestly tell you, thanks to the direction, and there's 4 sets of directors. Kofi Kanagi did the first 4 episodes. Ryan Fleck and Anna Bowden did episodes 5 and 6. Apologies, I forgot the name of the director that did episodes 7 and 8. Then another one that did episode 9. They've escaped my mind. My bad. Unfinished episodes. Just say insert credits. And if you don't get the direction right on a show like this, the show's not going to work. Of course, I mentioned there's a consistency within creative, but the directors come on board and they each have their own stamp, whether they're telling certain stories, whether it's them on missions, whether it's them on the ground, on the aftermath of certain missions, or as you're reaching the latter point of the war with the later episodes. It's a really interesting dynamic, and by having different directors you get different stamps, but the consistency with the actors as well really shines. I mentioned Austin Butler, I know I went way off point then. It's kind of what you expect of Austin Butler at this point. He is superb. He has natural charisma that just reeks in every performance. Every time you watch him on screen, you see him in an interview, you see him talking to people. He has that sort of factor, and it reminds me of one of those sort of 60s Hollywood icons that I think if his career goes the way I think it can, then he is going to be a force to be reckoned with in this industry for the next 10, 20 years. So Austin Butler is great in this series. I can't, again, tell you all about what happens to certain characters or actors. I mentioned it's based off real life. If you really want to look into it, pick up the book or visit the museum in London, or just outside London, sorry. We've got Callum Turner, who I think is sensational in this. I've only actually seen him in the Fantastic Beasts films. I know that he was in The Boy in the Boat, the new George Clooney film, but I thought he was great in this. He's one of the leading roles. We've got Arthur Boyle, who I have not seen anything before, and Charlie, who's always on the channel with us. She mentioned to me that he was the original Scorpius Malfoy on the West End for Cursed Child, and he's fantastic in this series. Again, one of the leading people that sit with us across the episodes that follow. So I've sort of pinpointed those three, and there's so many other names. Barry Keoghan's in this series, and he's only in it for a few episodes. But you've got to take the clocks back to 2020/2021. The career he has built in the last few years, and many of us, Ncuti was in this series as well. Belle Powley's in this series. There are so many actors, and there's a few more escaping my mind, which is really frustrating because there's some honestly incredible performances. Whether someone was a guest star for one episode, whether they're in all 9 episodes themselves, I felt like I was watching Band of Brothers for the first time. That there's a sense of camaraderie, that we're following this group, this squad, throughout World War II, throughout their missions, what happens to them after the missions, what are they doing in between them, what's the aftermath of things not going well. That's something I really miss with the Pacific. The Pacific is a good series, it's a very good series. I was very harsh on it in my review looking back, and I really struggled doing that review. But essentially you're following 3 lead characters and whoever's around them, and I struggled with that because I really enjoyed 2 but not the 3rd, and that sort of wiped out a third of that series for me. But with this one, because you're spending time with all of them, when it starts coming together, or you spend time with somebody on a different episode and then you come back to the others, it is always a welcome surprise seeing these individuals pop up across the space of a few hours. You're already connecting to them, and I think what makes war series such as this even trickier to do that with is that knowing it's based off real lives, real people, and like me, if you don't have that information about maybe what happened to them, then series are a great way to introduce that for you to then take it upon yourself to look into that more. And that's something I know that people did with Band of Brothers, with Easy Company, and I think it's going to be the same with this, that when this series is done in the next sort of 9 weeks, and this is why it's really tricky doing this review. I really want to talk about individual episodes, but I know I can't, and I don't want to ruin anything for anybody, but some of the visuals that we are seeing on screen is not something I ever thought we'd get on TV, and I said that before Band of Brothers, I know I did, but from a visual standpoint, how to shoot air combat stuff, it's a really horrible comparison. I think of Star Wars because George Lucas famously took archive footage from World War II or from World War II films, famously put it in his rough edit to show to studio execs that the basis of his space battles was the World War II air combat. And of course you can look at classic films, Dambusters will be one. Even recently we had Dunkirk, which, you know, it's Christopher Nolan, you had real Spitfires, you had people doing it, and it looked amazing and was incredible. But seeing these bombers coming up with hundreds of Luftwaffe come on screen, it's just something I didn't think we'd see, and for it to be shot in a way that you can not only follow the sequences, but like you would expect with a war series such as this, it's not going to hide the brutality of war, the horrors of war. We are seeing that, and even at times we are seeing the perspective of both sides of the war, different armies at certain points actually we can bring up too, that maybe we'll spend a bit of time with the RAF, maybe we'll spend a bit of time with the Russians on their front. It's a series which does a really great way of balancing that out while sticking with its main core of characters. And as I mentioned, those visuals look incredible. I'm going to also add a disclaimer. The review copies at times are unfinished episodes. It will say like insert credits, for example, and the VFX I don't think was finished in every episode. So I'm really going to visual effects. I'm going for the first couple of episodes because I do think there is room for improvement, and I'm 99.9% sure that it won't look like that on Apple in a couple of weeks compared to what I saw it with, and it still looks amazing, but there's a couple of little finite details here and there, but as an overall, that did not impact me watching this at all. And credit to Apple that they're one of the only services where you can actually watch screeners properly in like high res at home, so I have seen it in 4K, and it looked superb. And as I kind of said of this, that you're there with the characters, you're there with the action, and the story itself, it's something I didn't know a lot about. You know, here in the UK, when we're taught about stuff with World War II, particularly the flight sort of stuff, it's always like the Battle of Britain. You always get that sort of entry war perspective. And I've never really had the American perspective of what happened there. And you know, you've got the P-51s coming on board, and you've got so many other things, even minor ones that the British did their bombing in the nights like the Germans did, but the Americans would do it in broad daylight. So even learning more about that was really not just informative, but really intriguing for the series, and how even the Allies differed in their own approaches to war. And I just couldn't get more of it. I really want to rewatch the series. I might do it week to week on Apple, because it is one of them which I had a tremendous time. I know I'm very fortunate. I've seen the whole thing. I got to binge it. And I'm going to say to people, be patient with it. Be patient with certain episodes, certain arcs. I know I've watched the whole thing, but I don't know how I would do this week to week. I would personally be waiting for the end to do it all together, because that's how I saw Band of Brothers, that's how I saw the Pacific. I saw them through being lucky to be able to binge it. But at the same time, if you're really on board, you're really invested, then absolutely spend your Friday nights watching this once they go up, because it looks superb. And as far as the drama goes, it does everything you want from it. There's going to be certain moments where you're in utter shock, utter devastation. There's going to be other moments when perhaps like you're laughing at something funny that's come through with it, or you're spending time with these people and their chemistry, and you sort of feel like you're part of them for a very brief period of time until the real world kicks in. It's always tricky talking miniseries, it's always tricky talking TV, but as you can tell, I've obviously had a blast with this. Even the soundtrack, I absolutely adored. I really can't fault it. I mentioned potentially the VFX. That's my only question mark. And I can't say it's perfect VFX off what I've seen. It could be in 3 weeks. Great, that's another accolade for it. But if it's not, I worry that is something people will speak about. I really hope it isn't a problem. I don't think it's going to be a problem, because really the investment is also in the story and the characters and the journey they're going through. And if I'm going to sort of rewind back to the characters, I mentioned some of the great actors. If there's one person who I think absolutely steals this series, it's Anthony Boyle. Now, I mentioned I hadn't seen him in anything, and maybe that was more of a welcome surprise. When I saw Cursed Child, it was actually a different actor at that point in time. It was Jonathan Case, and I didn't know what to expect from him. I didn't know what to expect from his character, but I think he's the glue that holds the series together. And like many other shows, you know, people come in and go. You might see someone for an episode or two. They might be introduced in episode 8 or 9. If people are curious, comment. I'll talk about an actor if I've missed one. I've missed one of the big ones in my head, and it's going to frustrate me as soon as I finish recording. But I just really enjoyed watching this series for the first time. I'm pretty fresh while I'm recording this on the same day I finished the last couple of episodes, so it's very fresh in my mind. I've had a bit of time to settle, to think about it, and it's a series that I'm excited to go back to revisit. It's a series I think people are going to enjoy, and I actually think, as far as a benchmark goes, like Band of Brothers, I think in 10 years, 15 years, I think people will revisit this series, and we'll be looking at some of these actors. We'll be looking at this as almost an entry point to their career. I mentioned Austin Butler, the fact that, you know, this was being shot before he was even cast in Dune. We're looking at his career post Elvis, when this was being done pre Elvis. We're looking at Barry Keoghan, who this was again done pre Saltburn, and so of his big roles that he's starting to come through, Joker as well. We're seeing young actors, not, I don't want to call it breakthrough roles, it will be breakthrough roles for some of them. Some people might be in one scene, in one episode, and in 20 years' time, they could be like one of the biggest names out there, like a Tom Hardy or like a Michael Fassbender. And I'm excited for that, because I genuinely think this is a almost perfect series. And it's a series I'm excited for people to watch, for people to learn more about, and I think it's going to be very popular for those that do. So this is going to do it for my review on Masters of the Air. I hope this has made sense. I hope this is okay as a review goes. I hope it's not just me fanboying about how much I enjoyed the series. And at the same time, I'm curious to know what people think. So comment your thoughts if you're excited. If you've seen it, you're watching it down the line, you want to get your thoughts out there, do comment, let me know. There's no plan yet to do a follow-up video. Potentially when the series is done, there could be a great discussion to be had. We can get somebody else on who has seen the series. At that point, I might have actually been to the museum, question mark at the moment. to have had a bit more information, background stuff. And as I said, I'd like to rewatch it week to week as well, so you get to still follow it in that respective storytelling way. So maybe it's not all that's out there for Master of the Year. I mentioned I did a review for the Pacific Band of Brothers. They're both on the channel from the last couple of weeks. But where I'm going with this series, honestly, watch it, get the right setup. Don't watch it on your phone, don't watch it on your laptop. If you've got a good setup at home, watch it on there. You want the best speakers, you want the best visuals, you want the biggest screen you've got at home. Don't settle for anything if you know you've got better. I'm not going to tell you to go out and buy a system or something, but at the same time, your experience watching this is the experience you make it to be. And if I'm going again, I'd like it to be the best one. So that really is going to do it with this review. Thank you all for watching. Take care, and we'll see you on the next one.